Welcome to Aaron Plays. In this episode, I will be continuing my look at Nemesis, Burma 1944 by Legion War Games, designed by Kim Ganger. I'll be focusing this episode on the supply rules and the first Japanese activation, which is their assault kit. So let's start off with supply. Supply, there are three states. There's full supply, limited supply, and out of supply. For the Japanese, they get their supply, they've got supply sources here, any hex that's on the edge of the map which has this cream border is their ultimate supply source. It is defined in the rules as a supply entry hex, and everything must trace back to the supply entry hexes. There are one other one which is right at, actually I'll just show with the camera, this hex here. So those are supply entry hexes for, oh, there's another one here for the Japanese. Okay, one there, and this final one just over there. I marked them with little red cubes on them because those are the supply entry hexes. Now I'm going to be focusing on this area of the battlefield for both the supply rules and the initial part of the Japanese offensive. Both sides are in supply until they actually draw their supply chit, which is one of the four chits in the each faction has. So each faction has an assault, an attack, a reinforcement, and a supply chit. Now, both sides in the first turn start with their assault chit already drawn, but then the other remaining three are randomly drawn. And as I mentioned in a previous video, what I'll be doing is randomly drawing from then on all the chits. But if you were playing it two-player, you wouldn't draw randomly your first chit. You would choose the first chit each faction side would have. But I'm not doing that because I'm going to be playing it solo. And the other last caveat is you cannot choose the same chit for the first action that you had for the fourth chit of the previous turn. So in other words, you can't have the same chit twice in a row, even though it's split between two turns. So in the supply check rate, the reason why I'm doing supply check now rather than waiting for the supply check chit is a lot of the initial moves by the Japanese are going to be determined by their current and prospective future supply situation. So I thought it'd be useful to explain supply now, and probably will do again when the supply check comes out, but now so to explain why the Japanese are doing what they are doing. So looking here, as I say, this is the supply entry hex, and any unit is able to trace supply from that supply entry hex up to any length along roads and or tracks, not paths. So this here being a road, this is a path, there's a dotted line here, and the tracks are, let me get my pointy thing, this is a track here. So these Japanese units are in supply because they're on a road or track. This one here is also in supply, but not by that first mitigation, which is along these trails or roads. Then you've got a bit, or within range of a friendly supply depot or a friendly supply transporter that is also able to provide supply or occupy a reinforcement hex. Now, the depot one is the crucial. You see this here is a river. It's circled in blue and it's on a river, so this is a river supply source. Now, as long as this can trace back by road, which you can obviously at the moment to Kaduma, that becomes a workable supply depot. If for any reason this road link was broken, this would still be a supply depot, but it would only be providing limited supply. Okay, because it's then drawing supply down the river. But at the present moment, it's connected by road, so it will be providing full supply. The number inside the circle, that 5, is the amount of hexes it will be supplying forward from its position. Unlike many operational games where you trace from the unit back to the supply source, in this design you trace from the supply source forward to the actual units. Using rows for supply is at half a movement point. So from here it would be 1, 2, 2.5, 3 up to that point. If there was no British here, then it'd be 4, and then I think track is 1, so it'd be 5. Okay. You can also, that 5 is not restricted by that one that was the entry road requirement. So again, you could go 1, 2, and then move it into the mountains over there. That is 3 movement points. So that unit is currently being supplied by the supply source in Callaway. As soon as it wants to move beyond there though, so if it was actually here, it would now be out of supply, because that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can't get the supply into that hex. Remember, you're tracing forward, not back. And this is where HQs and transporter units become useful. So the HQ on here has got a 4 in a supply circle, so can supply 4 movement points from him, as long as he can trace supply back to Callaway. So he could be in this hex and then 4 movement points beyond him from that point on. There's allowed to be 1 HQ in any supply trace, and an unlimited amount of transport units, such as this mule. Okay, he's got a supply range of 2, and each one of these units can supply at least 1 hex. So beyond it, so for example, if this unit was in here, that's 4 movement points. It's only got 2 movement points on it, and this is movement points, not hexes, but it can always supply into the adjacent hex. So looking at that situation, that HQ wasn't there. This will get your supply source from here, 1, 2, into here, 3, 4, 5, and then from here, 2 movement points. Whoops, that's 4, but can always supply the adjacent hex into there. And let's put this all back together. So there can only be 1 divisional HQ in any supply trace. There is, however, the Japanese, they've got an army HQ. He can be also involved in the same supply trace. So maximum 2 HQs, one of which is a divisional, and one of which could be the army HQ if it was so used down there. So looking at the initial starting supply situation, okay, so these Japanese units here are having to use this path to gain supply. So that's 1, 2, 3. Remember, we're tracing forward. So 1 supply source from there, 1.5. Well, it's 1 track for track, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're just in supply at present. So that's full supply. Limited supply is, well, if that link was broken here, that would become a limited supply source. It's still over the same ranges, but the effective limited supply is you can no longer assault, and you defend at full strength, can still attack, and you attack at half strength. And then you also mark them with the limited supply marker. On large units, small units actually have, you actually flip them over and they have a limited supply size denoted by this sort of beige or darker, what is that, pink? Someone out there will exactly know what colour that is. But it's a shading around the combat factor to show that they're in limited supply. And if a unit is completely out of supply, it suffers limited movements and cannot assault, and it's half strength on both attack and defence. So if that trail was completely broken, as in if this unit was sort of here, he'd be out of supply. Without anything else, he's out of supply. He'd be marked with an out of supply counter, and he would suffer. He's got limited movement, cannot assault, and if he does attack in the attack phase, he attacks at half strength and defends at all times at half strength. The other thing about units that are out of supply, they also then can start suffering attrition, where they take step losses at the end of each turn. Or is it? Could be the supply phase. Let me check on that. Oh, it's both. Each friendly out of supply unit may suffer attrition after each friendly supply check and at the end of each game turn. Attrition is also one of the few ways that units actually get permanently lost in this game. Normally when you inflict a casualty loss, it goes into a losses box, but you can take replacements from the losses box, whereas units that die through attrition go into the permanent losses box, which you can't take replacements from. But that's just a slight additional there. Okay, so another way you can get limited supply is for the Allies. They can air supply and they can do airdrops, but I'm not going to go into the specifics of those until the supply chit is actually drawn for the Allies. So with the supply rules covered-ish, we will start with the Japanese first chit, which is this assault chit here. Okay, as it says on the counter, full move, 1 stack combat. Full move, 1 stack combat. So all the units on the Japanese side can now move, and as it says full moves, they can use their printed movement allowance, and also they can do something called operational stretch, which I'll now need to go into quite a bit of detail, and this is where zones of control become important. So in the assault phase, you can move your printed movement allowance, whereas in the attack chit you can only move 1 hex, and again there are limitations on that which I'll come up to. But in the assault phase you can move your 4 movement points, which or 6 as whatever's written on the counter, and you can do an operational stretch as well, which is a special move where you can actually move twice your movement allowance. The restriction being is you cannot enter or start in an enemy zone of control, and also it's dependent on the quality of the unit. So a quality 3 unit can always do operational stretch in any terrain, whereas a grade 2 unit may do operational stretch if the entire move, including the hex where it starts, stays on roads and or tracks, not paths. And quality 1 units may not do an operational stretch at all. So what that means for this little Japanese unit, let's start at this guy here. He's not starting in a zone of control. So let's look at what units and where has been affected by a zone of control. There's a zone of control here, 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 and here. There's also zone of control here. Now, this is because this is a grade 3 unit, so he's put zones of control into all adjacent hexes except across there. a lake. Actually, I should show a lake here, shouldn't I? A lake. So there's never going to be a zone of control from this hex to this hex, or this hex to this hex, because this lake is in the way. Okay, so going back to where we're working on. So a grade 3 unit, a quality 3 unit, puts zone of control into all adjacent terrain. So zone of control in those 2 hexes. This is a grade 3 unit as well, quality 3. So he's putting zone of control into these 2 hexes. Now this unit is a quality 2. He's not putting a zone of control into this hex, but he is here because there is at least a track there. But he's not here because that's only a path and it's not even connected. If that was a connected path, so with dots in these 2 hexes here, he still wouldn't be putting a zone of control. If there was a track coming from here to here, then he would. And again, same here. So he's not putting a zone of control into there. So what this means for this, if we're looking at this Japanese unit here, is he could do an operational stretch move into here, which will cost him, mountains cost 3 generally, but if they've got this escarpment symbol in there, that's classed as what they call a cliffs hex, high mountains, that costs 4 movement points. So he could go in there for 4, and he could carry on into there, and that is, get me terrains right, that is rough, yeah, so that's for another 2, 5, 6. He could then, along the road, potentially to there. He couldn't go into there because again we have a quality 3 unit putting zones of control in here, here. The armour's put into there, whereas infantry can put it into here. Yeah, that is another little slight stipulation there. Motorised units can only put zones of control, even if they're quality 3 units, they are treated as quality 2 units for zone of control because they can't put zones of control into mountains, or any terrain which doesn't have a road or a track. So the question would be, why would this Japanese unit want to come all the way to here? Well, one of the initial sort of strategies which the Japanese historically tried to do would be to cut off the Indian 17th Division, which is down here at Tidham. And if we look here, there's no actual supply source for these Indian units other than this road that comes down from Imphala. So cutting there would then mean that the only way these guys are getting supply is by air, and air supply by its very definition is limited supply, so they won't be able to assault, and they would be attacking at half strength. But on the first turn of the game, all units are in full supply until their supply chit is drawn, and then you check their supply status at that point. So at the present moment, even if that road was cut in the first allied phase, which is automatically again for the first turn an assault, they will be in supply. The other thing a Japanese unit can do, if it decides not to move, they can build a bunker in the assault phase, and if they do move, actually that's not true, if they move or not, they can place an ambush counter. The Japanese have 5 of these counters. There's my fingers in the way. 5 of these counters, ambush, and they can be placed after any unit of infantry, Japanese light troops, he says check in the rule definition, after any Japanese light troops, and light troops are the ones as defined with the white internal square unit symbol, can place one of these ambush counters in their own hex or adjacent. What these counters do, they're representing the way the Japanese set up roadblocks They send units forward and then create a roadblock, which hampered obviously Allied movement because they'd have to fight their way through them. So they cost an extra movement point to move through, and also they prevent the Allies doing operational stretch movement. Even if there's no zone control there, they would stop the unit being able to do operational stretch. They are removed at the end, either at the end of the turn or if an Allied unit ends its move in the ambush. And I believe they have something to do with retreat as well. I just checked up on the retreats. So you may not retreat into an ambush marker unless you're Japanese, or you're retreating back into one of your controlled objectives, or if you would take a step loss if you had to retreat anywhere else. So it doesn't prevent retreat, it just channels a retreat. That the only time you can use the actual ambush hex to retreat through is if any other option would cause you to take a step loss. But the Japanese are limited to 5 of these counters, effectively each turn. So let's get moving. So we're going to start with the offensive here. I'm going to remove these markers. Okay. And we are going to cut this supply route here. So using operational stretch, this unit here will go for 4 movement points into there, and then 2 movement points into there and stop moving. And he will drop an ambush marker here, and he can drop multiple, so he'll also drop 1 here too. The only limitation on placing these markers is, well, you can't place them where there's already an ambush marker, or an enemy occupied hex, or an enemy controlled objective, which none of those apply. However, I've now put that unit into an out of supply state, so that'll be the next part of the move, is to try to ensure that he maintains supply. And for that, that's what this. Okay, this boy here is actually going to drop one of his battalions behind him. Each of these regiments is made up of 3 battalions, and at any time the Japanese can drop off in their move 1 of the battalions, and you can even break it down further. I could replace him with 2 more of the battalions. Okay, the reason why I'm dropping 1 off there is because that's where I want the HQ to go here, and then the mule is all using operational stretch movement into there. So going back on the supply I was talking about, so here it's 5 movement points, so 1, 2, then up to the HQ into the mountains, 3, 4, 5. The supply is all tracing is always treated as if they were light troops, and not motorized or in any manner. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's then got 4 movement points, which puts the supply into this hex, and then he's got 2 movement points, which puts the supply into that hex there. So a little bit tenuous in the extreme. Notice that this unit here has its movement in red. That denotes that it is a motorized unit, so he cannot go. They cannot bring their artillery with them. Do they have any other artillery in and around this area? I've got some engineers, but no artillery that are mountain accessible. Over here they do. He can move in the mountains, but he's already along that path there. So we need something here to guard this HQ. So we'll send this infantry battalion forward. So 1, 4 into there. Now, this terrain here, which they do define as cliffs, can only be entered by light troops. So none of the 17th Division here are light troops. Light troops again, the white background. So these guys can't go through these hexes here. They couldn't even, if there was Japanese sitting here, you can only attack where you could move. So this could create a situation where a Japanese unit here could attack here. Well, that Japanese unit can't go in there because they've got yellow backgrounds. Only light troops. So let's bring in an extra bogus battalion. So a Japanese unit here could attack here and can't be attacked back. So it's one of the few war games I've seen where you can attack someone and they can't attack you. Now, one of the other peculiarities, and there are quite a few peculiarities in this game, is you can only attack 3 hexes. So in this assault phase, all over the board, there will only actually be maximum of 3 combat resolutions. And with the assault, you attack from 1 hex against 1 hex. So in this, the maximum amount of combat will be 3 hexes. Doesn't mean you have to attack 3 hexes, but that's the maximum you'll be able to get involved. And it all comes from 1 hex. Which then brings us to stacking. So in stacking, you may stack 3 large units, the Japanese. The Allies can stack 3 large units if there is a road or track in the hex. 2 large units if there's no road or track in the hex. And you can count a small unit as half a large unit. And no more than 1 motorised large unit or 2 small ones may occupy any non-clear hex. So even if there's a road or track in there, if the road is non-clear, you can't, because this represents congestion. So this is a track here. I'm thinking of attacking this unit. Is how to get the odds on it. Okay, so if we attack from this hex here with the artillery, I could probably get some more strength on it, or do I bring that unit back and attack from here, bringing up some bigger artillery, some bigger guns? Those are the options. Okay, so over here, I'm going to break this regiment down. So I'm going to leave a battalion here with the guns, and this infantry unit will march back. Now this is marching along the path. It can't use operational stretch because there was a zone of control into this hex from this unit and this unit. He can't use operational stretch, so he's limited by the 4 movement points. But he's moving along that path, which in the mountains is 2. So that'd be 2. Ah. 4 to there. I was hoping to actually get him here. So path in the mountains This is, I do have a little bit of problem with this terrain effects chart. Okay, it does say here, path in mountains 2. You can't see, it's just off camera. Okay. Path in mountains is 2. Shows it. Then if it's in heavy monsoon, it's 4. These are different columns that it goes through. But then it gives the, if entered by light troops, then the cost is 1 or 2 during heavy monsoon. So that unit can get back. Dink. Okay, because it only costs, because these light troops, it's 1, 2, 3 into there. So that's one unit. I then want to bring up some guns, and some big guns. So 1, 2 into there. And let's bring in some engineers as well. Okay, so that would equate to 3 large units, because we've got 2 small units and two large units. I will also put one of those ambush markers here. Actually, no, there's no point. No point. But what I will do is put these guys here that didn't move into a bunker. So for a unit that does not move at all during an assault phase may instead place a bunker marker in its hex. And a unit could create both a bunker and an ambush. Cavalry, transports, and motorized units may not create a bunker. The aim of the bunker is to improve the quality there. So those Japanese units, infantry, have now got a quality of 4. Then I'm going to move this gun up to this unit. 1, 2. Do I need to push any further there? I think I will. 3. And yeah, put some tanks in there. And again, fulfill the stacking limit requirements. And that will finish off the movement in this southern sector here. And this is where I will end this video. So thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed what you've seen so far. Hit that like and subscribe button. And any comments, much appreciated. The next video will continue with the Japanese movement around the board, and then we'll actually get into rolling some dice and the combat system. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, bye!